Welcome back. I'm Tyler, you're watching Scarfing Scarves, and welcome to the 56th installment of Last Week Lolita News. At the top of the segment, Angelic Pretty's re-release of Be My Valentine has completely sold out, the newly added Saks colorway is fracking fantastic, and it remains to be seen if the AP USA website will skits out again like it did in the first release, or if people will actually be able to purchase things without refreshing the main page a million times, start screaming, and then do it again 10 times faster because playing Barando Chat Roulette is apparently a low I will sink to get my hands on one godforsaken headbow from a series that AP decided must be in a pink that matches absolutely nothing I own. Those of you wondering at the specificity of that example should know that this is something that happened. I did get the headbow. And while my battle may be over, here's hoping the rest of you poised to enter the fray have it less spin the bottle unless the bottle is filled with liquor, in which case I suggest you drink it to numb the pain after this release is ripped out of your shopping cart by a frilly potato in the middle of Ohio. God knows those spuds are always up to foul play, and my completely uncalled for dig at Ohioans aside and transitioning to social news, Facebook group Ruffle Chat has managed to go the week without calling in riot police, and the ensuing peace has resulted in something I'm told is called harmless conversation. One prompt in particular was introduced by an OP we'll call Ashton, who asked, quote, "What's the weirdest thing strangers have asked you to do while out in Lolita?" They followed it up by imparting a time when they and their comm were asked to sing happy birthday to an elderly lady at a botanical garden during their meetup, and they agreed to do it, and the heartwarming yet strange story of asking some frilly randos to caterwaul at your grandmother aside. This soon led to a slew of equally confusing requests from a pandemic of people who were shaken just a little too fiercely as children, resulting in interactions that are best explained as what happens when you toss an infant like a frisbee and there aren't enough witnesses to get you convicted for illegal baby eating. That child then grows up to ask if they can take pictures of your stockings without your shoes on. That person is a prevert, and that actual story imparted in the comments aside, the tales of woe continued with random strangers asking unsuspecting Lolitas to hold their offspring. None of the parents seemed to find asking oddly dressed women to hold their babies to be a weird thing to do. And in one case, a drooling life ruiner was left to the care of a small group of frilly people for a solid 20 minutes without their consent. Perhaps mistaking them for fairies, and hoping they'd spirit the screaming creature beyond the veil so the woman could return to her life like it was before she fracked her way into a life sentence of raising human larvae in the age of student loans, extended adolescence, and a 1 in 10 chance that they'll grow up to be a Lolita at heart. This was preceded by a story of a group on a Christmas tour being asked by their guide to sing carols to another group, said guide inviting people to take pictures of them, and no one at any time thinking that maybe the frilly women who'd paid to be given the tour should be treated like the customers they were instead of unpaid employees. Was this tour guide drunk at the time? The least she could do is share her tequila after turning a private meetup into a pop-up petting zoo. Watch it, the goth one bites, line up single file to feed the classic one bits of lemon crumpet. One confused soul was asked to hold 2 chihuahuas for a picture as if Fido was going to look back on the memory someday in betwixt licking their unmentionables. And finally, to get to the end of these tales of woe, the strangest of the strange went like so. A group of Lolitas were out playing cards post-meetup when they were approached by an elderly man in a yellow inflatable superhero suit, asked if they would like to sing with him, and upon being refused, proceeded to crow like a possessed rooster before asking them if it was working with, quote, "My rooster cry is supposed to seduce little chicks like you." Those are now a sequence of words that exist in reality. You're welcome for the trauma. And considerations as to the apparent existence of Foghorn Leghorn's less charismatic love child aside, that about wraps up the week, and we turn towards Last Week Lolita News' next special segment. Some people should have to prove competency before being granted an internet connection. I suggest electroshock upon non-completion, and welcome to Wiki How Could You. It all started in Lolita humor, and with an OP posting a link. Said link led to a WikiHow article entitled How to Be a Lolita. Said article has all the informational calories of iceberg lettuce. And it's now the focus of our next special segment because technology is yet to grant me the ability to deliver parasol beatings via Wi-Fi connection, and someone has to say something before a newbie takes this as gospel, and we get 15 new Neko-Mato Frappafuckas cluttering up Closet of Frills like a plate of alt-fashion catastrophes. It should be noted that said article was apparently group written/edited by 37 people, cites 13 references, and none of that has improved it in the slightest because this is where useful information goes to die. So with all that said, we begin at the beginning, where things actually start out well. The article simply begins with a brief description of the fashion's origins, cites a basic time frame, and promises to help the reader, quote, craft your own Lolita look and how to pull it off with elegance and style. This all sounds well enough, and that is about the rough ending of words that don't combine combined to affront the entire community. Because that short intro on elegance is followed by an image that looks like a simplicity design buggered a thrift store, and tops that concept by suggesting you buy Lolita fashion clothing at Forever 21, H&M, and Macy's. There's no joke here, I just wanted the sheer frackwittery to soak in for a second. Someone else has to suffer if I'm to get through this segment without throwing my teleprompter at a wall. Not to be outdone in outrageous nonsense, the second section manages to impart that a party or church dress can be effective for pulling off a basic Lolita style, and ends it with the claim that while button-up blouses with a Peter Pan collar are the most popular, any kind of blouse can be used. This is wrong, and while it might be funny to watch a fully grown woman squeeze into her 8th grade formal dress before posting it to our Lolita with a pinstriped office blouse to complete the look, I'd rather we just skip the ordeal entirely, given that it would take 10 posts telling her she looked like she got dressed under duress before she announced that she was leaving Lolita because they turned out not to be lovelies. An assertion that while skirts can go below the knee, they cannot go more than 2 inches above it preceded. It should be noted that this article was last updated June 24th of 2019, not 2011, and they can shove their tall Lita hate back where it belongs in an era of 50 different head accessories and an ardent obsession with a pseudo-mime crossdresser who photoshops his face to the filter equivalent of Gaussian blur. Section 3 does manage to say something sensible about head accessories, meaning maybe you should wear some. Section 4 suggests you wear a petticoat, and wraps up Section 5 by declaring that all Lolita shoes should be chunky, because apparently this community needed a resurgence of these sacrilegious monstrosities, a moment of silence for the poor souls who bought them off eBay before someone could slap an entire tea party across their face. I was one of those girls in the beginning. I burnt them before they could be worn out of sheer terror with what I'd done, and suggest any of you considering it to reconsider before I track you down personally and you see some kind of frizzy-haired weirdo hopping your back fence to commit arson against your ugly shoes. I have too much time on my hands. This article wasn't finished, and this section of the article ends in telling you to accessorize with regretsy arm warmers, pocket watches, and a cane in that order, because apparently this Japanese street fashion comes in line perfectly with the wants of a crossboarding ferret who is lining their nest with the vestiges of old-fashioned mistakes. Thus ends Part 1 and begins Part 2, picking a specific Lolita look, where they offer, and I quote, "try a classic bad girl look," claim Gothic is the most popular style, and includes the recommendations for mysterious makeup, a concept that makes zero sense unless the clues to a mass murder are buried in your eyeliner. Meanwhile, Sweet Lolita has reigned supreme for a fracking decade. Was this written by an outdated word generator stuck in 1992, or am I having a series of small strokes? The affirmation of my soon-to-be hospitalization comes with the venture that people can also try a, quote, cute girl look, sometimes called Sweet Lolita, below a picture of a gaggle of neon night terrors wearing sneakers, a sentence I can't believe I said without suffering a fatal hemorrhage to my frontal lobe. Which they compound by saying you don't have to wear a blouse if you wear country Lolita, like all it takes is one bag gingham under a straw hat to excuse you from any basic fracking decency. I don't understand the type of thing I'm seeing, and it only gets worse from here. Because they then move on to describe the rarity of Wa Lolita and land squarely in what they describe as aristocratic Lolitas, which is not a thing. The long skirts and corsets they're alluding to refer to elegant Gothic aristocrat, and they continue on to advise those who are seeking more masculine looks to try sailor Lolita. I presume those who actually wear the sub-theme were not consulted on this. I'm sorry to inform you that your giant dress and head bow are apparently super manly now. Should have thought about that before you had the utter gall to wear navy and think people would take you seriously as a girl. Cadona is mentioned shortly afterwards, for which the proper term is oji, a fact they would know if the inside of their head wasn't a lonely void occasionally occupied by the research abilities of a drunken hamster. And they end Section 3 with other suggestions to, quote, butch up your look with yet another call to carry a cane, the very same beating stick that should be employed on anyone who thought that term was appropriate in relation to a hyperfemme fashion. Do you actually think before you type, Karen? Oh wait, you thought Sailor Lolita was masculine. Never mind, don't strain yourself. We're aware you wrote this by licking your keyboard until it produced something resembling a sentence. Which brings us to Part 3, being a Lolita. And a white-centric recommendation of a pale foundation aside, red lipstick is now mandatory for all goths, sweet Lolitas need to have bouncy hair, and all goths must now have pin-straight locks with bangs, no curls for you ladies. Your hair needs to be as straight as the woman who wrote Butch Up in full sincerity. The article moves on to judge people who don't wear Lolita every day, insist that you read the GLBs, and maybe head to an anime or Lolita convention, the latter of which doesn't exist, a testament to the ignorance of someone who wrote Lolita meetups often cater to lifestyle Lolitas who are interested in incorporating more traditional homemaking skills into their lives. Only someone who'd never been to a meetup would attest that these ramen quaffing mega weebs would be anything but dangerous in the kitchen. Frilly clothes do not translate to 50s housewife. And while there are plenty of people in this fashion who can cook, half of you would still burn water, and I count this as strike 20 in favor of this writer being an aging role player who saw one bit of poofy skirt and started pining for the days when the feminine mystique had ladies too busy collecting appliances to accomplish anything of actual merit. The workforce is a lot easier to compete in if half the population is busy popping out 2.5 children in a picket fence. And finally, this ride through Pleasantville comes to a screeching halt by bringing up Nabokov's Lolita, summarizing it as a young girl in love with an older man, proving that no sentence is impossible if you're too dumb to stop yourself. I can't believe this complete Looney Tune has forced me to defend the book Lolita. For Christ's sake, it is not about a young girl falling in love with an older man. It is about an aging predator molding and taking disgusting advantage of a fracking child. For frack's sake, did you wake up on the wrong side of human potential this morning? Because I'm rating this wretched essay as disappointing on a scale that's taken civilization down by several pegs in utter asininity. This was the most frack backwards testament to mediocrity I've ever read on the subject. I'm sure there's plenty more where that came from, and that's all the time we have for tonight. Comment below if you'd like me to make a painful series out of these. This has been Tyler. You've been watching Scarfing Scarves. And before you leave this place to forget what you've seen, you should know that this show is sponsored in part by BB&B. They make the best faux confections I've ever seen. Link to their shop below, and to wrap things up with a big fracking bow, I'd like to thank my patrons for making this show possible. You guys are the best community of people this show could ask for. And should you like to join their number, watch videos a week before the public, or see the rundown of what goes into an episode before I cut the copious amounts of expletives that would get me demonetized at gunpoint, you can head over to patreon.com/lastweeklolitanews for more content of that variety. Plus you can ask questions like why are you doing this to yourself, suggest videos you'd like to see, and or watch me melt down as a person in ways you'd never witness in the public spectrum. I am not responsible for the things you'll experience. Thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you next time.